Well, hi. Yes, I'm César. It's very nice to see everyone here. So, my job here is to moderate today's conversation, really, because that's what we're hoping to have. And so, first point in the agenda is to introduce our speakers. First, we'll have speaking Marisel Hernandez, partner at Jacobs, Burns, Orlove, and Hernandez. And I'll just talk a little bit about each of our panelists. Marisel is a partner, as I said, Jacobs, Burns, Orlove, and Hernandez, where she has represented labor organizations and public and private employee benefit plans since 1988. Prior to Jacobs, Burns, Orlove, and Hernandez worked as a trial attorney for the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and the National Labor Relations Board. She graduated from NYU Law School in 1982. Since 2006, Hernandez has served as commissioner of the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners. She sits on the board of the Institute for Law in the Workplace at IIT Chicago Kent College of Law. Second, we'll hear from Angie Cowan Hamada. Hamada, partner at Allison, Slutsky, and Kennedy. She is a Peggy Browning Fellow alum from 2004-2005. She's a partner at Allison, Slutsky, and Kennedy, where she represents private and public sector labor unions, employee benefit funds, and individuals in employment matters. Cowan Hamada graduated from IIT Chicago Kent in 2005. During her last year of law school, she received a Peggy Browning Fellowship and worked with the Chicago Newspapers Guild. Prior to law school, Cowan Hamada worked for Local 35 of the Hotel Employees and Restaurant Employees International Union, HERE, as an organizer for the Greater New Haven Central Labor Council. So third in our roster here is Alexandra Gillett. She's a law student at DePaul University College of Law, and she is a Peggy Browning Fellow from this year, 2014. She's a 3L, and she worked at Working Hands Legal Clinic in Chicago this past summer. Gillett is focused on employment and immigration law to pursue her interest in immigration workers' rights advocacy. She is continuing to extern at Working Hands Legal Clinic this fall, and she previously interned at the Farm Worker and Landscaper Advocacy Project, DePaul's Immigration Clinic, and Centro Romero. Gillett is a graduate of the University of Michigan and plans to move back to Michigan to work in employment and or immigration law. Then our final two speakers. First, we're going to have Daniel Murphy. He's an attorney at the NLRB Region 13, senior field attorney here in Chicago. He graduated from IIT Chicago Kent College of Law in 1991 and has been practicing labor law at the NLRB since that time and has litigated a wide variety of disputes and issues in federal court as well as before the administrative law judges. Finally, Chris Williams, Workers' Law Office, is one of the founders and director of Working Hands Legal Clinic in Chicago, which is a mentor organization to the Peggy Browning Fund. In 2011, he left Working Hands to start his own practice, Workers' Law Office, and now works with a national network of worker centers addressing workplace abuses in a variety of industries from temp workers, restaurant workers, warehouse workers, and domestic workers. Williams has been lead counsel or co-counsel in over 300 wage and hour and employment discrimination cases. Prior to practicing law, he spent over a decade as a union organizer for Chicago area labor unions. He currently teaches a class at IIT Chicago Kent College of Law on legal issues affecting low-wage workers. Okay, so with that, we're going to start with Marisel.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I think what's interesting here is we have kind of different generations of attorneys, and you'll hear different perspectives. I went to NYU, and all I knew at that time was that I wanted to do something in the public interest and help people. But at that time, I think there was no such thing as mentors or anyone to help me or guide me. So what I ended up doing was applying to the federal government, and I got an invitation to come in and interview at the NLRB I had taken one labor law course at NYU at the time. I don't recall how many there were, but I don't think it was very extensive. And I fell in love with labor law. I was at the board for a while. I started out in New York, and of course the beauty with the federal government and the NLRB is you can transfer over. So at one point when I moved here, I was able to get here through with the NLRB and transfer over. After being at the NLRB for a while, I moved over and applied for a position with the EEOC, trying to broaden my experience a little bit. NLRB is mainly administrative. At that time, we never went to federal court, no injunctions. But the EEOC provided me with the federal court experience. I stayed at the EEOC until I was asked if I would come over to the firm I'm presently at. One of the things that I try to mentor a lot of law students and college students who want to become lawyers, and those especially in the labor field. It's so hard now to try to get your foot in the door, and one of the things I tell them is, I know you have that big application for the federal government. I almost feel like it doesn't matter where you get in. When if it's the Department of Labor, if you can get your foot in, the important thing is getting your foot in the door. Because once you have your foot in the door with the federal government, you can always move around, and it's much easier moving around. And that's what happened to me. I was able to move from the NLRB in New York to Chicago, and then move over to the EEOC. But I know there's so many law students who would love to practice labor law. The ideal place to start is the federal government. Then there's the state agencies, the related agencies. That's the ideal place to start. If you can get your foot in, I would say almost any agency, and then you could start with the skills you obtain. You can always try to transfer over, and I've helped some people do that. The other important thing, which I didn't have in my younger days, was networking. And you don't know who somebody knows. It's always important to do these kinds of things. Get to know people. Don't be hesitant about asking for their cards and their contact information. Email them, and if they don't answer, email them again and again, because I know for a fact that of all the emails I read, I say, oh yeah, I gotta answer that person back, and then 15 seconds later I'm on a totally different project that I need to get something done, and it's not intentional that a few emails slip by. But if you're persistent, someone will recognize that. They won't consider that negatively. On the contrary, I think it's persistence pays. But it's very important to stay in contact with people in the labor field, and to get to know them and see who they know. Even people not in the labor field. If you have an attorney, you never know who another attorney knows. And so always try to be, it's hard, I know, but try to be outgoing, try to network, try to go to events like this. And even if you have a job, let's say you're in the labor field, you still do the same thing. You still network, you still get to know people, and you lend a hand to those who are trying to get into the field too. So I've been working at my firm for 25 years now, and we do all sorts of labor and employment cases, representing unions before the NLRB, in arbitrations, in state court, in federal court. We represent the health and welfare and pension funds, the offshoots of the unions, and do a lot of ERISA and related fields, wage and hour, and cases under the Family and Medical Leave Act, civil rights cases. So it's extremely, extremely varied, and that's one of the things I love about working in a firm where you're dealing with all of these different issues. And the other options, though, are to work, with a union in-house, and I didn't get the chance, although I work very closely with the AFL-CIO, and that's very gratifying to me, volunteering my time and doing work for them. So I will stop at this point.
Thank you very much. Yeah, just to let our panelists know, you have about 7 minutes each, and I will police it with a sign that says a minute. About a minute left, okay? Angie, Cowan, Hamada.
Hi, thank you for attending this event this evening. It's great to see such turnout and so many people interested in practicing union side labor law and employment law, or at least learning more about this field. To give you some background about myself, I, in college, started working for a labor union, and we always had to go to our attorney before we did anything, approving flyers or can we picket. And I found the array of answers we received and the type of analysis that it took to answer our questions very interesting. And I thought that practicing union-side labor law would be a great way to do something I was very passionate about and help employees, workers, and unions. The law is very interesting in this field. It's always changing. The types of workforces that our country sees is changing, the types of employers. The law is changing itself. It's always growing and evolving. So there's never a dull moment in this field. At the law firm, I went to my law firm right out of law school, and I pretty much received a lot of training regarding how to practice, how to handle arbitrations and how to handle unfair labor practice charges, but I was also given a lot of independence to do that work on my own, in part because of the experience I had as a law student in law clerk positions and specifically my Peggy Browning Fellowship. My last year of law school, I was a Peggy Browning Fellow for the year with the Chicago Newspaper Guild. And in that fellowship, I was very fortunate to see firsthand and participate in an array of different labor and employment law matters. I attended negotiations with the Chicago Sun-Times, which were very contentious. We were very close to a strike. I had to put together a strike do's and don'ts flyer and do all the research, and I had to come up with some creative proposals. And for the negotiations, I got to work firsthand with the members, and I even helped discuss organizing strategy, and I got to see arbitration. So that fellowship was a really wonderful experience because not only did I get to see how labor law worked firsthand, but I also really got to participate. Craig Rosenbaum, who was my boss, mentor, during that fellowship, really listened to my ideas and what I had to say. and I felt like we worked well together as a team. And that's a pretty empowering and unique experience as a law student. And from my discussions with other Peggy Browning fellows, their experiences are typically similar. So it's a really great fellowship to get some real experience before you graduate law school. Practicing union side labor law and plaintiff's side employment law is especially appealing to a lot of people who are interested in some sort of public interest law. I am very passionate about what I do. I look forward to going to work on those late nights when I'm up working late. I have the adrenaline going because I want to win that case. I want to get that employee back to work. And being excited about what you do, I think it really helps. I feel very fortunate to say that I love what I do when I go to work every day. Just to reiterate the importance of getting in, I got my reminder, of getting into this field, networking is very important. Chicago is a great community. You have lots of opportunities to take advantage of networking. Chicago Kent Law School holds many events that are open to the public. Attend those. There's a group called LERA, the Labor and Employment Relations Association, that has student memberships. Attorneys, union members all attend those. You should attend those as well. The few students who do are typically, we talk often and get to know them on a first name basis. So again, thank you for attending this event, and if you have any questions, feel free to talk to me after.
Great. Thank you. So next in our list is Alexandra Gillett, who actually I'll give you a little bit more time because she not only will talk about her experience as a Peggy Browning Fellow, but also will give you a little bit of information of how to apply for the fellowship.
Yep. Oh. Hi, I'm Alex. I was a Peggy Browning Fellow this last summer. It was really fun. I was at Working Hands Legal Clinic. Also, I am at DePaul. I'm a 3L this year. And I'm actually still at Working Hands Legal Clinic through this fall. It was such a great experience. But it's not through Peggy Browning, it's just through, I'm an intern. So when I started law school, I didn't really think I was interested in employment law. In undergrad, I was becoming a Spanish teacher, and I ended up doing this program where I taught English to migrant farm workers, and through that, I just learned I have to do something to help these workers. They work so hard, there are all these abuses, I have to do something. So I initially thought, oh, I should go into immigration law, and that's what my mind was set on my first year of school. And then I got my first internship during that summer, and it was actually with the Farm Worker and Landscaper Advocacy Project, which is now a mentor organization for Peggy Browning Fund. It wasn't at the time. They are focused only on employment law, and it just opened my eyes to all that I could do to help these workers. So it's a suggestion I have is if you have come into law school with one idea, like you want to do employment law, still keep your options open and explore different areas. Not to turn away from employment law, but there's always something out there that could really surprise you how much you're interested in. My experience at Working Hands, I did a lot of legal research, which is pretty typical of internships, and all very interesting. I dropped a lot. I got my 7-Eleven license, and through that I actually prepared to do a direct examination at an administrative hearing, which was really cool. But then when we got to the hearing, it ended up we didn't need my direct exam, so that was kind of a bummer. Chris was there. But it was great learning how to do that, and the case I'm hoping turned out well for us since I didn't have to do my direct. But you get some really good hands-on experience, with the litigation side. I also got great direct experience with clients. Working Hands works with a lot of the worker centers in Chicago, and I forget how many there are a lot. But we've done some clinics with the worker centers at their locations, so I've been to South Chicago, almost to Indiana, doing a clinic there, taking intakes. I just did a Know Your Rights presentation in Pilsen. So you get a lot of hands-on experience with clients. What else? Oh, another part that I really loved this summer, I got to help do research for like changing policy in employment law. So Working Hands and the workers' centers, they work hard to change the law so it's more favorable to like low-wage workers. And so I got to do some research particularly in wage lien laws, and then also we started looking into franchise law and seeing how we could change it to be more favorable to workers. I guess, that's all my experience. I guess I'll move on to talking about how to apply to the Peggy Browning Fund. So yeah, I just did this last year, so it's fresh in my mind still. So I'm sure you're all kind of aware of what this fellowship is. It's a 10-week funded fellowship from Peggy Browning. The minimum stipend is $5,000 for 10 weeks. A lot of times the organizations will supplement this and pay you more. And you're mostly paid by the mentor organization. There are a few exceptions. Let's see, eligibility. Only 1Ls and 2Ls can apply to this. So it's usually in the summer during the summer. So graduating 3Ls can't participate. And you may apply up to 5 mentor organizations. So the mentor organizations, they can include unions, government agencies, nonprofit organizations, workers' centers, and union-side law firms. And the locations of these organizations, like we mentioned earlier, they're all over the country. I mean, there's a few in Chicago, some in DC, New York, Pennsylvania, California, all over. So how to apply? If you're on Peggy Browning's radar, if you've given them your email, they should be emailing you about when the summer 2015 applications will be ready. I think it'll be starting in December. You can also look on their website in December to see about when they open. And then the deadline, which is important for the application, is on January 16th, 2015. And you apply online, and generally you'll include a cover letter, resume, some certain application forms that Peggy Browning requires, and then probably a writing sample. So the requirements of the fellowship is, so you complete the full 10 weeks, and then you have to do a fellowship feedback report. So you just write up a little report about your experiences and how great it was, what you learned, what you hated, all that good stuff. And then after that, in October, you go to the conference that we've mentioned earlier, and part of that conference is special for the fellows who they talk about their experiences with everyone else. It's called the Fellowship, or what is it? Fellows Wrap-Up Workshop, yeah. And then you can attend the rest of the conference, which is about 2 days, and there are different workshops available that you can learn that specialize in different areas of employment and labor law. Another perk of the fellowship is that you get a nice alumni network. So we've talked a lot about networking tonight, and it is very important. So I know, just within the national alumni network is great. Even in Chicago, there has been a little alumni group, and actually Sarah is part of it. She's up front, she's leading. She helped start it, and it's great. So far we've only had one event, but I think we're going to have more, and it's great. Yeah, and then just other general networking events and opportunities come up through Peggy Browning, and yeah, it looks good. Let's see. Oh, and then I'm going to plug the conference a little bit. It's on October 17th and 18th. I know it's coming up, and the registration deadline for it has passed, but if you are interested in going and haven't registered, you'll need to call Marianne Maffa, so just come up to me afterwards if you're interested. You can still get in. and it's in Baltimore, so you have to take a little trip. And yeah, there will be over 150 people attending. There will be attorneys, former fellows, students, everyone interested in employment law. So thank you.
Great, thank you. So now we're going to hear from Daniel Murphy, attorney at the National Labor Relations Board.
Hi. Thank you. Before I begin my comments about the National Labor Relations Board, I could take this opportunity to thank the Peggy Browning Fund for allowing me this opportunity to talk to students who are interested in labor law. Now, as most of you know, the National Labor Relations Board is an independent agency created by Congress in 1935 to administer the National Labor Relations Act. Basically, the statute guarantees a certain set of rights for employees, employers, and unions in which to engage in collective bargaining and organizing. It's hard to believe, but even now, there are a fair number of people in the United States that don't quite believe in this act. But we still kind of plug along and we do the best we can with what we have. Now, the Labor Board basically does two things. We run secret ballot elections for the purposes of determining whether or not a union is going to get the right to represent employees. And then we pretty much guarantee that that union, if it wins, has the right and obligation to engage in collective bargaining with an employer. Sometimes that's kind of hard to do too, to get the parties together. The second thing that we basically do is investigate and prosecute unfair labor practices, which are a set of, as I'm sure many of you know, a set of rights and obligations for both unions and employers in which employees have a certain set of rights. And if you violate those rights, we come in and tell you not to do it. And we also, may get employees back their jobs and stop unions from picketing and all sorts of things. As Marty Mallon can tell you, he's got a fair number of labor law classes here that will teach you all about it. And the intricacies of the law are vast, and there's a fair amount of information that you need to know about the act. Now, basically, unfair labor practices are processed after somebody files a charge or a petition is filed at the board. We're right over at 209 South LaSalle. You walk right in and file whatever you want. This fellow over here,
Do it all the time.
on occasion, does. And a certain number of people down there do it also. All right. After that happens, it's assigned to myself or some other person in the office who investigates it. Basically, we are allowed to take affidavits from people, which means I make you raise your right hand and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And we interview you, gather information, and see whether or not the law has been violated or not. This takes anywhere between a month to 2 months. And after that, a decision is made by a panel of smart people at the region to determine whether or not to issue a complaint or not. Now, as you probably well know, the National Labor Relations Board is an administrative agency in which we don't have authority to enforce our own orders. In other words, you win a case, hooray, hooray, the employer will say, forget it, I'm not listening to you. So we have to get our orders and decisions enforced by the circuit courts. That's done by another group of the board in Washington. But from my vantage point as a field attorney, my job is to investigate and prosecute unfair labor practices at the regional level. Currently, Peter Orr is the regional director of Region 13, and we have a fair amount of work to do these days because labor and employment law has changed vastly in the last 3 or 4 years. And it's kind of an exciting time to be an attorney at the Labor Board. Now, as an attorney at the Labor Board, basically what you're going to do is enforce the rights guaranteed by the Act, as I've said. Now, that job has a direct connection to a lot of what you do in law school right now. Basically, civil procedure, legal writing, property of all things, since it comes up on more than one occasion. Agency law is always a big deal now, especially with certain cases such as McDonald's and whatnot, is who's an agent and who's in charge. It may not seem to be very complicated, but there's a fair amount of people who are going to earn a lot of money saying otherwise.
The corporation's in charge. Just so
Oh,
you know.
yeah, okay. Now, So, of course, trial advocacy and evidence classes are also very important. I spend a fair amount of time trying to figure out how to get a document in or how to get a person to testify in a proper way. So all those things that you're learning right now in law school are absolutely directly involved in what I do for a living. Matter of fact, that's all I do for a living. All right. So basically, after I present a case to the regional director, he decides to issue a complaint. I've had a fair number of complaints lately with Facebook, work rules, certain franchises, and whatnot, in which I have to draft a complaint, which in your civil procedure class, you certainly know how to do that. Everyone takes it as far as I recall. And you learn how to do legal pleadings, and that's what I do. After that, I have to present it to a administrative law judge for anywhere between 2 days to, my longest has probably been 4 weeks every day. So you have to present witnesses, argue, and whatnot. And then after the trial, you get to do that wonderful thing, such as such as file briefs and whatnot. Right now is a great time to enter into the labor field. I can't tell you how different it is from 15 years ago when we were just seeing unions go down and everyone's kind of moping around. Now you have student athletes, are they employees or not? Who would ever thought that would have happened? They came from Chicago. Peter Orr and certain other labor organizations have dealt with that issue in Chicago. The WOCC, the Workers Organizing Committee, is exceptionally active in Chicago and nationwide, and is taking on the largest corporations in the United States right now, maybe the world, on fundamental issues that no one has paid any attention to for years. Franchise agreements, of all things. Now, when you really start looking at these things, you go, well, why didn't somebody start looking at these things? These corporations run everything from uniforms to scheduling, and they're not responsible for what this organization does. I mean, I'm not saying one way or the other how the facts are going to end up, but the bottom line is that these are really pretty fundamental, important issues in America today, in which labor and labor advocacy groups are taking a strong position on. Who would have ever thought that United Auto Workers would run a campaign down in wherever it was, Tennessee. And whatnot. And senior U.S. senators are starting to talk about laws that have been enacted for 50 years and how they shouldn't be down here. I mean, it was, this is a very interesting time to be a labor lawyer. But in any event, that's what I do for a living, and it's an exciting time to be a labor lawyer at the National Labor Relations Board. If you're interested in labor law at the region or at the labor board, as Marisel says, fill out the form. It's a big one. It's hard to do, but get used to it and figure out the intricacies of the application process. And also send your resume and your application to the regions that you're interested in, because many times they have independent authority or independent ability to review who they like and who they don't like. In addition, there are all sorts of internships and whatnot at the labor board that you can get yourself into the door on. I myself am a staff attorney. I am not responsible in any way for hiring and firing. I just train you after you're done in a nice, gentle way. But that's what I would suggest that you do. There's plenty of work. Lots of people are retiring, and there's a lot of movement at the labor board right now. The whole generation of people are moving on, and it's time for new blood. And many of you should give it an opportunity. Thank you.
Chris.
My name's Chris Williams, and I'm here, I think, to represent the mentor organizations and the non-labor law firm and non-government agency, so the sort of alternative to that. Just to give a little brief background on myself, my first career was as a teacher in the Chicago Public Schools, union activist on the picket line. There was a recent strike 20 years ago. There was a strike. I was on that one, not this one. Well, I was on this one, but just as an ally. I also taught English as a second language, GED literacy in the evening through the City College of Chicago. We organized the union through the City College of Chicago. I was active in that, became union president with AFSCME, and then the union hired me to be a union organizer. So my first career was teaching, sort of union activism. My second career was as a union organizer, healthcare, group homes for developmentally disabled, so forth. And I did that for about 10 years. And my friends who had been teaching ESL classes, where, guess who's taking ESL classes? Low-wage immigrant workers. Guess who's taking GED classes? Guess who's taking literacy classes? People whom the education system has failed tend to be low-wage people of color. So my friends who were teaching in those programs still saw me as a resource because I was working in labor unions. I knew some things about certain laws. And we started to meet up again and do these Know Your Rights presentations and so forth. That was about the time when worker centers, these new labor type organizations were coming into being. And the characteristic of these classes that I was teaching and my friends were teaching is that most of them were not in unions. And there is a growing sector of the workforce that are not in unions and frankly are in jobs that are very difficult to organize. And I'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about the development of Working Hands Legal Clinic. So I went to law school at that point, and so that was my third career, about a decade in each. And at the beginning, Marisel said we have different generations here, and so I'm a little confused because I just got I'm chronologically old, but I just got an email from the Chicago Bar Association for the young lawyers section. So am I a young lawyer or am I an old guy? But in any case, going to law school, kind of having this background, working with these community-based worker centers, which are now, I think the number is 8, but that changes on a daily basis. So, restaurant industry, warehousing industry, temporary staffing industry, neighborhood-based, South Chicago you mentioned. There's a variety of worker centers that are really addressing this if not unorganizable sector, difficult to organize. And Daniel keeps looking at me talking about the franchising arrangements, the temp staffing. There's an attenuation now between the worker and the end user of the labor. There's oftentimes 3 or 4 people in between, 3 or 4 company entities in between. So we have a cleaning case, for example. People are paying $10,000 for the right to push a mop around and a broom around, and then they end up making $2 an hour, if that. Right? Are they employees or are they just their own business owners looking for the American dream? So those are some of the types of questions that we're seeing. We, I along with a group of people from the worker centers, after I graduated law school, we set up this nonprofit organization called Working Hands Legal Clinic, where Alex talked about as a Peggy Browning Fellow. I think we've been getting a Peggy Browning Fellow every summer since 2007. I think we were the first non-labor law firm and non-government agency to get one, which I thought was really, Joe Lurie, who you heard, was very forward-thinking and forward-looking, because the reality is part of the reason there aren't a lot of positions at labor law firms is there are fewer and fewer workers in labor unions. And so labor unions are doing more work in-house, or they just don't have the need for lawyers. And so we talk often about labor and employment law. So what we did at Working Hands Legal Clinic is more on the employment law side, because the labor law doesn't really apply, right? There's no unions, Now, I will say that we just prosecuted a case with the Labor Board for temporary staffing agency workers who engaged in protected concerted activity, and the Labor Board, to their credit, took that case, fought that one, and won it for these temporary staffing workers. On not such a good side, we had a case where a warehouse contracted with a temp agency to bring in 100 workers. This is a Bissell warehouse, vacuum cleaners. So the workers started to organize a union, and so the warehouse owner fired the staffing agency, did not fire the employees, did not fire the workers, fired the staffing agency, which effectively got rid of all the employees. How many minutes is that?
It's 1.
1 minute, okay. So in essence, are these workers, is that an unfair labor practice? To fire the staffing agency, at that time the Labor Board said, no, I think the Labor Board is re-looking at some of these things, as are other government agencies. The thing I would say about working hands and the opportunity to intern is really there are great opportunities. We have had Peggy Browning Fellows who literally you can look at legislation in Illinois and you can see words that some of our Peggy Browning Fellows have written and have ended up in the law. You can see we created this whole small claims adjudicative process at the Illinois Department of Labor, and people with 7-Eleven licenses can actually come in and do cross examinations. I know you missed the opportunity. Darn those settlements. But those are opportunities that you do have. It's a great opportunity, and I guess the end of the message, the last message before César pulls me off here, is be creative and think creatively. Yes, definitely network. I know Alex. That's somebody. She knows me. We can talk, but also be creative. When we came in, there wasn't a job for me at a labor law firm to do the kind of thing I wanted to do. We created what we wanted to do, and we built on that. Working Hands Legal, I'm not with Working Hands Legal Clinic anymore. I have my own firm, but I'm on their advisory committee. We're currently working on franchise legislation. We're working on Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights. We're working on amendments to the Day and Temporary Labor Services Act to regulate the temporary staffing industry. And we're working on amendments to the Wage Payment Collection Act, all of which will benefit low-wage workers. So those are opportunities for Peggy Browning Fellows, interns, volunteers, and it's a great resume builder. And believe me, as someone who hires attorneys, I look for that. I want to know you have passion for it. I want to know you dedicated your own time for it. And I want to know that my time is up.
Well, we have some time for questions because we started a little late. I'm going to go until 5:05. That's okay. But before we go to questions, and then right after we finish, there's going to be a reception, which I'm assuming is downstairs, Marty? It's right here? Food is back. Oh, it's right here, right? So we have an hour to schmooze and to talk, and you can meet panelists and others. But especially, before we go to questions, there are some Peggy Browning fellows here, alums of the program here that I want that if you could please stand up and say your name and say hi and what class, that would be great for us to know before we go to questions.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I was a Peggy Browning Fellow in 2011, and I was with the Communications Foundation of America.
My name is Alex. I'm a Brielle here at Kent. I was with the Chicago Newspaper Guild during my 2L year, and this past summer I was with AOT's General Counsel in DC.
Great. Anyone else? It's good. Okay, then questions from the floor.
I have a question from this side of the floor. And the question is, Dan, how do you find out about the internships at the NLRB? What do you do?
Typically, you can go online at the nlrb.gov. Right now, they are accepting honor applications for a certain group of attorneys that have a certain grade point average. I was never one of them, but they certainly are accepting them right now. You could also call the region, talk to, I think, Jessica Muth, our Deputy Regional Attorney, is currently dealing with hiring, but you can also go online and see where that's at. We have a very comprehensive website.
Over here.
Suggestions for non-traditional students who, I was a school teacher as well, and I have a lot of experience in labor unions with that. Do you have any suggestions for you kind of standing out and differentiating yourself in a resume or cover letter, or is it just more really
Yeah, I started at Kent in the evening program. I was able to fortunately switch to the day program in the third year, so I finished in 3 years, but the first 2 were in the evening program. I like people like you that have that experience. I mean, real life experience is very important, and we do this thing in employment law where some laws provide for attorney fee shifting, and the judge decides what our value is, what our hourly rate should be. So we have to sell ourselves, and they have this Laffey matrix where it's based on your years of experience stuff. So I'm coming in after 20 years of work, but only 10 years of as a lawyer, and so that laughing matrix doesn't work for me, right? So I have to go and always talk about, look, I know what I know because I negotiated union contracts, I organized people, I was on picket lines, I did, I'm good at what I do because of that experience, and that's valuable. So, I just equate that to what you're talking about, sell that. That's very important. I think a lot of employers look at that as very valuable.
I have to say that I've litigated some school stuff in the last several years, obviously on the private side, for adjunct professors and also the students. Are they students? Are they employees? Educational law and educational labor law is a real difficult thing to break into, and also hard to figure out. I mean, I come from a industrial / services type of investigative and litigation background. School stuff confused the heck out of me for at least 6 months because I just didn't get what you guys did for a living. I think it's a very important thing to have that sort of experience outside of the regular law, because facts are important in labor law. Facts are always important. And when you understand how they fit together, that's a really good thing. And if you have that experience, that's a good thing to sell. It's excellent.
I have a question. So what about the student, the law student who's actually hasn't had any work experience and just got interested in this thing called labor law that learned very recently in law school after taking Marty Mallon's class, right? Or my class, yeah. So what about that student? What because we hear that you like to see folks with experience and that are really interested in creative. What about that other kind of student?
I can tell you, as the hiring partner at my firm, the last few rounds when we hired, one of the first things we look for is a genuine interest and passion in practicing this type of law. So as long as you have that and you express that in your cover letter, we're going to keep reading. We're going to look at your resume, and if we like what you have to say, we'll interview you. We did interview people who had stories to tell about their parents being in unions or their parents not being in unions and how that affected them, or something they learned in labor law that just really ignited a spark within them that made them want to practice that. So yes, experience is very valuable. If you have it, definitely mention it, but a genuine interest and passion in this law will get you far in this field, which is one of the unique aspects of it.
And the other thing is if you have that situation, volunteer. If you can volunteer 4-6 hours a week, doing something, working for, a worker-centered, something relating to employee rights, do it. And again, this is where social networking comes in. And if you don't know where you should start looking, you should be contacting labor lawyers and say, where can I volunteer? And can always come up with something. And as a bonus, sometimes they could even say, well, we kind of need somebody. Maybe you can come in for 4 to 6 hours a week and we'll pay you. So always, look for if you think you're interested, and it's worthwhile. Because once you start doing something, then it either validates what you think, or maybe it doesn't.
Can I just add to that too? I mean, look for opportunities with legal organizations, but if you're interested in labor law or employment law, look for opportunities organizing for some of these worker centers or non-traditional labor unions as well. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the legal stuff. And I don't know, Angie, if this is true for you, but I look for, when I'm interviewing, I look for passion. I look for demonstration of that passion. It's one thing, if everybody in this room now knows if you interview for a job at my firm, show a lot of passion, right? But I also look for, how did you demonstrate that? Did you volunteer for an organization? Were you involved in Sweatshop Watch, or did you do something at a worker center or a legal organization? Yeah,
there's always rallies you can attend. This is a city that's not short of opportunities to be active in labor. You just have to seek them out.
Yes, over here.
Can you guys elaborate more on the day-to-day practice for what it looks like to do labor and employment law at a law firm, I would say?
Okay, well, I'll give you a little taste of it. Let's see. So, since last week, I have a client who's been striking out in the suburbs, and the employer filed a motion for a temporary restraining order and injunction. And it was served last Monday at 4:30, and then I had to be heard Tuesday morning. So I had to spend a long time at the office drafting. Luckily, we've done this before, so I had the points and authorities in support of why a TRO should not be entered. But I had to call the client, find out what's going on, you know, and they explained it to me, you know, got everything together, appearances, and then went to court first thing in the morning. You know, there was a TRO that was entered, and then we had to schedule a hearing for preliminary injunction, and then I had to go back to the office and then brainstorm and say, wait, okay, what can we do here? You know, how can we counter this? And then I had arbitration I had to prepare for, a hearing, a discharge, and so I in the meantime I was trying to prepare for that, and then I was internal union matters. So a client asked me to draft some bylaws for a union that's coming out of trusteeship. So here I am drafting the bylaws, having telephone conferences to see what he liked about it, what he didn't like about it, changing it. And then I had NLRB issues. So I was dealing with some board agents from the NLRB on some charges I filed. You know, some good stuff, some bad stuff, trying to figure it out, explaining to the client why, you know, we were in a good position on some cases and not on others. And then on the federal court side, then a couple of Family and Medical Leave Act cases, making sure that discovery was out and I didn't need to do anything else. And then in the meantime, I have some arbitrations scheduled for November, and then I'm trying to get documents and then assess those there. And lastly, I have a brief to write that's already 2 weeks overdue, and I have to write that tomorrow and Friday.
We have time for one more question. Back there.
I just out of curiosity, there's someone else here amongst us, how important to you is the consistency of the externships we take? If, for instance, our first one else semester we look at it and go, you know, I'm really interested in criminal, and then he goes, no, never again. Start going down the employment law side or the labor law side. How important is the consistency of externships to you as a hiring manager?
I think we understand that a lot of law students are discovering what it is they want to practice in law school. I think what's important is what you do once you realize labor and employment law is what you want to practice. And of course, there is experience you will get with a criminal law externship that will carry over to labor law. So in your cover letter or resume, I would make a point of mentioning that. Did you talk to defendants? Did you do legal research? Did you write? I mean, these are things you do no matter what area you practice that are transferable.
I would say in hiring somebody, though, I would be looking more closely at the answer, well, why do you want to do this kind of law now? And that's where I think, you know, if you are at some point figure out that this really is something you're passionate about, you know, put it into action right away. Go find an internship somewhere, go volunteer at an organization, you know, be able to demonstrate that this isn't just a passing fancy, and, you know, they wouldn't take you at the state's attorney's office, so you're just applying here.
Well, we can continue our discussions over schmoozing time. So please, let's thank everybody.